A hat is a head covering which is worn for various reasons, including protection against the elements, ceremonial reasons, religious reasons, safety, or as a fashion accessory. In the past, hats were an indicator of social status. In the military, hats may denote nationality, branch of service, rank, and/or regiment. Police typically wear distinctive hats such as peaked caps or brimmed hats, such as those worn by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Some hats have a protective function. As examples, the hard hat protects construction workers' heads from injury by falling objects, and a British police custodian helmet protects the officer's head. A sun hat shades the face and shoulders from the sun. A cowboy hat protects against sun and rain, and a Ushanka fur hat with fold-down ear flaps keeps the head and ears warm. Some hats are worn for ceremonial purposes, such as the mortarboard, which is worn during university graduation ceremonies. Some hats are worn by members of a certain profession, such as the toque worn by chefs. Some hats have religious functions, such as the mitres worn by bishops and the turban worn by Sikhs. History. While there are not many official records of hats before 3000 BC, they probably were commonplace before that. Archaeologists think that the Venus of Brasumpui from 26,000 years ago may depict a hat. One of the earliest known confirmed hats was worn by a Bronze Age man whose body was found frozen in a mountain between Austria and Italy, where it'd been since around 3300 BC. He was found wearing bearskin cap with a chin strap made of several hides stitched together, essentially resembling a Russian fur hat without the flaps. One of the first pictorial depictions of a hat appears in a tomb painting from Thebes, Egypt, which shows a man wearing a conical straw hat, dated to around 3200 BC. Hats were commonly worn in ancient Egypt. Many upper-class Egyptians shaved the head, then covered it in a headdress intended to help them keep cool. Ancient Mesopotamians often wore conical hats, or ones shaped somewhat like an inverted vase. Other early hats include the pileus, a simple skull-like cap, the Phrygian cap worn by freed slaves in Greece and Rome, and the Greek patissos, the first known hat with a brim. Women wore veils, kerchiefs, hoods, caps and wimples. Lycosi, Toland man was preserved to the present day with a hat on, probably having died around 400 BC in a Danish bog, which mummified him. He wore a pointed cap made of sheepskin and wool, fastened under the chin by a hide thong. Saint Clement, the patron saint of felt hat makers, is said to have discovered wool felt when he filled his sandals with flax fibers to protect his feet, around 800 AD. In the Middle Ages, hats were a marker of social status and used to single out certain groups. The 1215 Fourth Council of the Lateran required that all Jews identify themselves by wearing the Juden hat, marking them as targets for anti-Semitism. The hats were usually yellow, and were either pointed or square. In the Middle Ages, hats for women ranged from simple scarves to elaborate pennon and denoted social status. Structured hats for women similar to those of male courtiers began to be worn in the late 16th century. The term milliner comes from the Italian city of Milan, where the best quality hats were made in the 18th century. Millinery was traditionally a woman's occupation, with the milliner not only creating hats and bonnets but also choosing lace, trimmings and accessories to complete an outfit. In the first half of the 19th century, women wore bonnets that gradually became larger, decorated with ribbons, flowers, feathers, and gauze trims. By the end of the century, many other styles were introduced, among them hats with wide brims and flat crowns, the flower pot and the toque. By the middle of the 1920s, when women began to cut the hair short, they chose hats that hugged the head like a helmet. The tradition of wearing hats to horse racing events began at the Royal Ascot in Britain, which maintains a strict dress code. All guests in the royal enclosure must wear hats. This tradition was adopted at other horse racing events, such as the Kentucky Derby in the United States. Extravagant hats were popular in the 1980s, and in the early 21st century, flamboyant hats made a comeback, with a new wave of competitive young milliners designing creations that include turban caps, trompe-l'œil-effect felt hats and tall headpieces made of human hair. Some new hat collections have been described as wearable sculpture. Many pop stars, among them Lady Gaga, have commissioned hats as publicity stunts. Famous hat makers. One of the most famous London hatters is James Lock & Co. of St James's Street. The shop claims to be the oldest operating hat shop in the world. Another was Sharp & Davis of 6 Fish Street, Hill. In the late 20th century, museums credited London-based David Schilling with reinventing hats worldwide. Notable Belgian hat designers are Elvis Pompilio and Fabien Delvine, whose hats are worn by European royals. Philip Tracy OBE is an award-winning Irish milliner whose hats have been commissioned by top designers and worn at royal weddings. In North America, the well-known cowboy hat manufacturer Stetson made the headgear for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Texas Rangers. John Kavanagh was one of the notable American hatters. Italian hat maker Borsellino has covered the heads of Hollywood stars in the world's rich and famous collections. The Filippi collection is a collection of religious headgear assembled by German entrepreneur Dieter Filippi, located in Kurkal. The collection features over 500 hats, and is currently the world's largest collection of clerical, ecclesiastical and religious head coverings. Styles. This is a short list of some common and iconic examples of hats. There is a longer version at list of hat styles. Size. Hat sizes are determined by measuring the circumference of a person's head about 1 centimeter above the ears. Inches or centimeters may be used depending on the manufacturer. Felt hats can be stretched for a custom fit. Some hats, like hard hats and baseball caps, are adjustable. Cheaper hats come in standard sizes, such as small, medium, large, extra large. The mapping of measured size to the various standard sizes varies from maker to maker and style to style, as can be seen by studying various catalogs, such as Hammacher Schlemmer. Traditional hat size is worked out by adding the fore and aft and side-to-side measurements, then dividing by 2. In the UK, an equivalent hat size is 1/8 of an inch smaller than in the US.